Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 6th of December 2023, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, David G7URP. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, we find out about the secret listeners of Gilnahirk from George Busby and Roger MI0WWB. We bring you details of next week's special Christmas evening at CNS School. And we find out what on earth this is. Now, if you think you know and you haven't already told us, please drop it on an email. On a message on BATC or Facebook, and we'll read it out with that if you know what that mystery object is. But we start with club news, and we're really excited to bring you news of what we hope will be a nice surprise evening for you all who can join us at CNS next Wednesday. Whilst online talks enable us to have guest speakers from anywhere in the world, and it's been really enjoyable doing this, it is nice also to see people in the flesh, both members and also a guest speaker. So for our last meeting before Christmas, Tammy and I have arranged a very special guest. Rob Howard is one of relatively few engineers left who specialises in repairing and restoring a wide range of really old vintage electronic equipment, from televisions to radios to rather special Christmas lights. His workshop is called the Vintage TV and Wireless Company, and it's based in Norwich. And he was the super fixer engineer who fronted a major 10-episode television series in July on UK TV's Yesterday channel called Retro Electro Workshop. You may remember that we promoted it. In this series, he restores many pieces of diverse equipment from the 1980s computers to old televisions, a C5, and even a visit to the Ross Revenge ship, which of course is home to Radio Caroline, and where he repaired one of their record decks and cart machines. Not only does Rob repair and restore old equipment, but he also supplies many props for major films and television shows, literally from James Bond to the Larkins. In fact, he has over 100 old televisions in stock in Norwich, covering many eras, and not only do they all work, but he can help the film or television company show period film or programmes on it. That's including the 405 line sets. Amazing. Take a look at this whistle-stop tour which Tammy and I made of his workshop and just a little of his stock.
We've got in the actual, this is obviously the first part of the shop, which used to be a shop in here, but it's not a shop anymore. It's where we store a lot of the TVs that we hire out for filming. And I use the Royal We quite a bit as well, because it's just me now. But this is also the hire stock in here. These are various radios and these we hire out for film and TV work. I've moved the TVs in here because they're getting far too heavy for me to move around. So in this centre section here is where we used to have a workshop, and now it's where we just sort of store all the stuff that's come in for restoration. So it works quite well as a space here. But the magic happens in the actual workshop. It's much warmer in here. I was working on some ancient bubble lights, Christmas lights. It's just stuff everywhere, really. It looks organised, but it's not. Box and box of bits. I think you can have a. Where you go. Just more and more higher bits, really. It's just, probably when we did the TV show, we moved a lot of stuff around, and I've been so busy since I've not had much chance to move it all back. So it does look like someone's slung a hand grenade in here, but it's organised chaos. But it's again mainly hire TVs, stereos, bits, anything with a plug on it. Really, we hire out. So there's not if they ring up and ask for something, it's normally here. And just round the back, you've got all the there's a whole load of old CRTs in there which we keep for spares in case one goes. And just small sort of bits and bobs we hire out, from hair dryers, irons, old electric heaters, teas maids. So anything with a plug on it, it's probably here somewhere. Calculators. Oh, there's high voltage. Actually, Victorian ultraviolet ray when they thought blasting yourself with ultraviolet was a good thing. Yeah, lots of bits.
Now that just gives you a flavour of what Rob does. He restores, he repairs, and as I said, he rents out a lot of those things. And we thought he'd make an excellent guest for us because he's a local man, actually the son of Martin G7UGB as well. And that's how he kindly put us in touch with him. So we hope you'll enjoy meeting Rob. You'll be able to ask questions. In fact, he's not going to give us like a long, big formal talk. He'll be bringing some really good props with him. Bits of equipment that are special, maybe they've been difficult to fix or they've been ended up on famous films and all sorts of things like that. So I hope that it's something we thought that would interest just about everybody, since most of us are interested in electronics and the way things work. So we hope you'll come and support the event, which is happening next Wednesday at CNS School. As our usual time, 7 till 9:30 is when we meet, and the talk with Rob will start just after 7:30. And so very much it will be interactive. So you'll be able to talk, ask questions, and meet Rob afterwards as well. So we're really pleased that Rob has done that. And if you've missed, by the way, the television series and you'd like to see it, and there are some really, really great classic bits, including his visit to the Ross Revenge for Radio Caroline, then you can find them on the UK TV player. So Catch Up TV. You can find them on most smart TVs or online, and I'll include a link of how you can watch it online on your computer as well in this weekend's newsletter. So again, next Wednesday, that's the last meeting of the year, and we hope you'll come and support it. All NARC members are welcome. Also, as you know, the following week on the Tuesday, we've actually got our NARC Christmas dinner, and we did receive quite a lot of applications for that. We have a few spaces left. It's going to be, this is about 55, I think, people. So we do have about 10 spaces, 10, 15 spaces left. So if you didn't make it and you didn't decide, or you couldn't decide whether you wanted to come, let me know, and we can probably squeeze you in even at this stage. That's happening the week after on the Tuesday. No more news about the club, and the contest news with NARC have again won the RSGB Autumn Contest Series by a considerable margin. Many thanks and congratulations to all those members who really work hard to keep us up the contest ladder. Congratulations from both Malcolm, myself, and of course all those other NARC members, because we really appreciate what you do to put our club very much on the contest map. This Saturday we've got the Koblensked, our monthly visit, and of course this will be our Christmas visit to our twin club in Koblenz. Usual times, 10 o'clock on Saturday, 7.123 megahertz, also a local talk-in on 145 250. Everybody's welcome. And finally, just a reminder about membership for 2024. A lot of people have already renewed, but if you haven't done so yet, you can find details on our website. Also on many newsletters, I put that on there. There's the details there for you as well. And if you'd rather pay in the old-fashioned way with a bit of cash or something, it's just £10 per person. Bring it in an envelope next week, and you can pay on the night as well in cash if you wish to. Now, just one bit of members' news this week, but it's a lovely bit of news. I think we're starting to feel Christmassy, Tammy.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to wear a Christmas jumper tonight and you said no.
You called me a Grinch.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Anyway, yes, so it is Christmassy, and we've got somebody here. NARC members James M0UKS and his partner Lynn literally light up the skies of South Norfolk every Christmas, and this year's no exception, with more enhancements and additions to their display, which is all run from 3 Raspberry Pis, which play the music, control the lights in an incredible way. And he's added a few bits and pieces to it. So let's take a look at this mini video of their light display.
We should just say this does go to music. But it's a short clip and we didn't dare put the music
Can we
on.
play them a
just
little
in
tiny
case.
bit, or
No, I haven't got any music.
Okay, right. No, it is to a very famous.
Well, no, there's about 4 or 5 songs. But
Yeah, the bit I saw though was a very classic bit of Christmas music.
yeah.
As you probably know, though, if we play this out on, particularly on
Short
Facebook,
piece.
we will just dump us off there. Anyway, it's a wonderful display. If any of you would like to go and see it, I'm sure James wouldn't mind us giving you the address. I won't give it out online here, but if you want it, just
I
drop
think
us an
also,
email.
are you going to put there's going to a full video link? Are you going to put
Oh,
that
yes,
on
we're gonna-
newsletter this week?
Absolutely. We've got a full video of all of the effects. And by the way, James has shown some of those at some of the Raspberry Pi jams over the last few months as well. So some of you have been attending those. You'll know the sort of technology that he puts behind it. I think it's a 1 Raspberry Pi B, he said, and 2 Raspberry Pi 4s control all that stuff and the music and everything, and plays it all out in the evenings outside his house, so and Lynn's house. James actually sent a message this afternoon and said it costs about £20 in electricity to run those lights for Christmas. At least that's what he tells Lynn. That's what I think. I wonder who pays the electric bill. Anyway, well done. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, James. So if you'd like to have a look at it, then drop me a line, and I'm sure with James's consent we can let you have his address and you can go and have a look at it in person. Right, that's it for our main news. Let's go now and have a look at Little People, Tammy.
Yep, here's the little people for this week. I picked this one because it just looked cool.
Oh, yeah.
It's so simple. It's supposed to be obviously a spell, a wizard spell, but it's just the effect of the orange just looked really cool, like it was actually
Oh, is that an orange?
exploding.
I have only just realised what that was. I was about to say to you what it is.
Tangerine or something like that.
Yeah.
Satsuma.
And seasonal because of that.
Yeah.
That is really, really good, isn't it?
Just a
looks
little
like
bit light.
A little Harry Potter type character
It
there.
is
as
Harry
well.
Potter, yeah.
Brilliant.
There you go.
And what have they done? Do you think they've lit it from behind then?
I'm not sure. Maybe there might be a little bit of Photoshop trickery in there as well, but I suspect it's lit from behind too. Very high.
And it will show you
Light.
miniature-calendar.com is where you need to go. They put a new picture on every day. It's a lovely one. Thanks very much, Tammy. So please keep in touch with what you've been doing. This is the last NARC Live for a little while. We're going to take a little break over Christmas. But if you've got any news or anything special over Christmas, or you get something special in your Christmas sack that you'd like to share with everybody, then don't forget to drop us a line to this address, radio@dcpmicro.com. We'd love to hear from you. Now we return to our competition before we meet tonight's guest. And we asked you 2 weeks ago tonight, what on earth is this?
Dun, dun, dun.
I thought this was really difficult. Now, I've got to start with an apology, which is not the normal way that we start. But as some of you know, I've been moving my mail from one company, one server to another. And that has not gone very well, I have to say. I better not name the company, but it's still going. They're still managing the migration. Now, it also meant, and what's relevant to this is that I'm afraid I lost about 5 days' emails in this transition, probably the ones between the 22nd and the 27th of November, which meant that the early entries for this item, I'm afraid, I haven't got any more, and I'm really, really sorry. It's the first time that's happened. So if you did send an early entry and I don't read it out here, please forgive me. I'm really sorry. It shouldn't happen again. But there's nothing I can do, literally. I do remember, though, there were several people on the night who told us what they thought this was. So take that from me. Forgive me. Anyway, the ones we have got. First one, Bruce G4KZT said, I remember seeing something like this many years ago on the dashboard of a vintage rally car. I asked the owner what it was, and he said it was to hold a stopwatch, which the co-pilot operated.
David M7BLX, the latest picture is of a stopwatch clip holder. I used to use one to hold my stopwatch to a clipboard during my time as a work-study engineer. Some people referred this to time and motion analysis. Ironically, now enjoying retirement, there is so little of either.
I remember working for a big company, David, and they had these people come around with stopwatches, and they were doing time and motion. They weren't very popular with the employees anyway. John 2E0TWQ, he says, could this be a modified bicycle mudguard bridge holder? I can see how that could be. You know, the mudguard shape, yeah?
Colin M0GMK, I think this week's object is a stopwatch holder used in motorsport.
And Mike GAEY says, here we have a stopwatch clip, Terry Timer dashboard pilot cockpit rally car watch holder, an adjustable clip made by the Classic Terry Company for mounting a stopwatch on the dash of a classic rally car for navigational purposes on a regularity section, and other things as well. And we'll see.
I remember one of the other entries
Oh, do
actually,
you?
because you showed it to me, and it was James M0UKS, and he said he thinks it might be a watch holder because his dad used to have one on his bicycle. Do you remember
Yeah,
that?
you could be right. Yeah, and I said I do apologise to those of you we lost your entries. Anyway, let's just check and find out what the answer is. What is this?
It is.
It is a stopwatch mount. Kindly sent to us by Tony M0TDK. That's how it works.
I think this particular mount, though, it was to actually mount in a aeroplane.
Yeah, I think he said that when
Yeah.
he sent it to us. But
Yeah.
obviously it has other uses. So anyway, well done if you got that. Once again, apologise if you sent me a solution and I didn't read it out, but we appreciate all of your entries. Well done. So we've got a new what on earth object to leave you with for a few weeks. Some of you might know what this is, some of you not. Let's have a look. What on earth is this? Ah, do you know what that is?
Yeah, I saw the picture.
Oh, yeah, okay. I wouldn't have known, I don't think, But it's something that a lot of you will have used and may still use and may have one in your toolbox. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not allowed to say any more. Send your answers to radio@dcpmicro.com. I'm going to keep them securely this time backed up somewhere else. Send them to us if you know what that object is, and we'll read it to you next time we're with you on NARC Live. We are, by the way, I just mentioned that we are very short on objects now. As we said last time, we've had a couple more in, but we really need some. So if you've got one of those interesting tools or gadgets and things at home, you could just take a picture of it and send it to us, please. Or even just link it to us. As long as it's online, we can offer a copyright credit. Then, of course, we could use that as well for something that you think might fox people. Then please send it to the usual address, radio@dcpmicro.com. Okay, let's have a look before we meet tonight's guest. And let's have a look at what's happening in this coming week at NARC. On Saturday at 10 o'clock, as I mentioned earlier, it's the Koblenz Sked 7.123 megahertz. 10 o'clock on 145-250 is local talking. Everybody welcome. On Sunday, the GB2RS news on GB3MB repeater at 7 o'clock. And on Monday at 7:30, the Monday Night Net on GB3MB as well. And then at 8 o'clock, the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. And the next Wednesday, December the 13th, we will be in person at CNS School from 7 o'clock to meet Rob Howard and find out all about how he runs his business, all the things that he's repaired and which films he's supplied props and things for. It'll be a fascinating evening, I think you'll agree. And don't forget to keep sending us your stories and your mystery objects as well to us. Now, at this point, I normally also suggest that you send us you'd let us know about who you'd like to send a card to. And as well as our regular card, Tammy has said that she'll redesign a Christmas card for us to send. This is the one we used last year. It's a special NARC Christmas card. And this is something that you could use to cheer people up. We're not going to send you a whole Christmas card list. I think as Steve said last year, he's going to send us a whole list of all his Christmas cards. But for someone maybe who's, feeling a little bit alone, which often people do at this time of year, maybe they've not been very well, just someone you think would appreciate a NARC Christmas card. And what we're going to do is if you need to tell me in the next few days, we're going to print those off because we design them in-house. Tammy designs it. We'll print them off. We'll bring them to the club next Wednesday, and then everybody there will be able to sign it, and we'll be able to send those off in time for Christmas. So that'll make a really extra special card signed by lots of club members. So please let me have the name and address of the person. They don't have to be an amateur. They certainly don't have to be a member of the club. They don't have to be a radio amateur. Let's have a name and address for them, and we'll add your name and everybody else's as well who's at the club next week. We'll get them to sign lots of cards. Email them as always to radio@dcpmicro.com. It should bring a lot of cheer at Christmas. And that's it for our club news. Now we meet tonight's guest. And as I put in the newsletter this week, it's a fascinating evening discussing the secret listeners of Gilnahirk. There's actually, it's totally by coincidence as well, if you're an RSGB member, you'll notice in today's Radcon, which hit the streets there's actually an article about the VIs, the secret listeners, and we're going to find out all about a specific group tonight. We're going to see in a little while a talk by George Busby, but first we're going to meet Roger, MI0WWB, who's going to give us an introduction to this film and then talk afterwards. So Roger, good evening to you.
Good evening, David, and thank you very much for the invite to speak to your club night. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll just first of all make a little introduction about myself. I'm not long in the radio hobby. I entered amateur radio when I retired. 2015 was when I was licensed, and by 2017 I'd found CW, and now my rig no longer has a microphone attached. It was really through growing up nearby to the Gilnahirk listening station that I got an interest in radio, which lay dormant for years. And then I met George Busby, who will be the speaker tonight. I've known George for many years. George is not a radio amateur, but he does have an interest in Gilnahirk, a radio station. He's ex-RAF. When he retired from the RAF, he became a BT engineer until he retired. But his interest is primarily, in fact, in local history and in the history of Gilnahirk listening station. So that is basically it. I'm not sure how David is going to actually stream the video, but if not, I can. So I'll pass back to David and we can take it from there.
Thank you very much, Roger, and we will be seeing you later, as you said. This was, unfortunately, George is unable to join us live tonight, but we have got a talk that he gave to Roger's club a few years ago. It was done by Zoom, and thankfully Roger made a recording of it so that we're able to play this for you now. It's a fascinating story, and afterwards Roger will come back and hopefully be able to answer any questions or comments that you've got for it. So now we're going to play out the video, and we will see you in a little while. Don't forget to keep those questions and comments as well. Put them onto BATC or Facebook, and we'll read them to Roger at the end.
We're very glad to have George Busby and Brian Clark with us today to talk about the workings of Gilnahirk Wireless Station, a Y station that operated from 1940 until 1970. Brian worked in this location over two different periods in the 60s and 1970s, and we'll come to that later. But first we'll pass over to George for him to make his introductions.
Thank you very much, Roger, for that. I'm now going to give you a very brief overview of the history and purpose of Gilnahirk radio station from 1940 to 1978. Now, my story begins in 2004. What you're looking at is the former Gilnahirk wireless station. In its day, this was a place of absolute secrecy where questions were never asked because answers would not be forthcoming. Operations ceased in June of 1978. So approximately 26 years has passed before I even begin my research. My task primarily to recover the history and purpose of this former government building. We now take our story back to the 1930s, when British intelligence discover that the German Adver organization is already beginning to recruit agents and spies within the United Kingdom. And these spies and agents will use wireless telegraphy as one means of keeping in touch with their political masters back in Berlin. This fact comes to the attention of the War Office, to the Committee of Imperial Defence. Now, at this time of peace, it is the responsibility of the GPO through the illicit wireless intercept organization to both license and police the airwaves of the United Kingdom. The question on the table Would this organization be capable of meeting this task in the event of war? It is therefore decided to create a second organization known simply as the Radio Security Service. And this organization will initially oversee and control the work of the GPO, but if required, will step up to the line and take over. Now, these are the officers of the Radio Security Service, drawn from within the ranks of Royal Signals and military intelligence. And the Radio Security Service is divided into regions across the United Kingdom. And here in Northern Ireland, the officer in charge is Captain Joe Bannon. He comes to Northern Ireland shortly after the outbreak of World War II. He establishes his headquarters in Telephone House, and his first purpose is to find a suitable site for a new purpose-built wireless station. At this point in time, the GPO are using Ballygomartin radio station. A suitable survey is conducted in the Greater Belfast area, and a suitable site is found approximately 5 miles from the centre of Belfast, near the village of Gilnahirk, in the townland of Ballyhanwood. Construction begins at the end of 1939, and by May of 1940, Gilnahirk Wireless Station is up and running. Now, please understand, this is a civilian operation. There are 58 personnel covering 3 watches, 24/7, 365 days a year. There are 12 internet set positions, 2 are double banked. There's a shortwave DF underground cabin, a medium wave DF hut, 9 mobile DF units spread across the province. These are manned by 36 personnel. And last but not least, the Radio Security Service, as part of Special Communications Unit number 3, have also established a radio station on the site. This is the way things remain up until September of 1942. At this point in the war, it is decided by the Radio Security Service to allow the GPO to step back, and they themselves will take over responsibility for the Gilnahirk operation. The station now becomes station number 4, and everybody working at this location is wearing a Royal Signals uniform. And that's the way things will remain up until May of 1945. So from May 1940 to May 1945, Gilnahirk has been supplying Bletchley Park with raw signals intelligence. Now, from what we can gather, from June 1945 to June 1947, the station reverts to the GPO, who place it under care and maintenance. And we believe that there was an Air Ministry input, but that has not been confirmed. Then in July of 1947, GCHQ arrive and take possession of the wartime facilities. And this now becomes Composite Signals Organisation Station, Gilnahirk. And that's the way things remain up until May of 1952. Now, unfortunately, this is not a great photograph, but what we have within the blue circle are all the components of the wartime and post-war station. To allow for the development of this site, a series of wooden huts have been erected along the side of the road. That now allows the area within the yellow rectangle and the wartime station to be demolished to make way for a new post-war Cold War station. And this is CS.
Okay, we've obviously got a slight problem there. This is something that we are playing live from Zoom servers. We're just having a look and see if we can sort out what the problem is. Any ideas, Tammy? Sorry about this, everybody. This is a surprise to us because we have played this through and checked it before. And we're going to try and find out what's wrong. So sorry about that. I'm going to see just if we can sort this out quite quickly. If not, we may go to Roger a bit early while giving Tammy some time to sort it out. As I explained before, George Busby, as you could see, gave this original presentation, and originally when we booked him a lot earlier this year, we did hope that he'd be able to join us live, but he wasn't able to. But this was a good backup really plan, and we haven't had a problem like this before. So let's have a look. And I know Tammy's timed it, and we know that we certainly have the time. So
we're very
okay. So Tammy's now playing this through now, and we'll just see if we can join it. If not, we'll join Roger slightly early. I know there's still a lot more to say. So, okay, we're going to try and pull it back a few seconds and then play it out again. So let's see if we can go now. By the way, the reason that the format is like it was that this was recorded by Zoom at the time, and was the presenter's view, unfortunately, which means that you're seeing the next slide in the top right, but the main big slide on the left is the one that everybody at home saw. So here we go.
And this is CSOS Gilnahirk from 1953 up until its closure. Now, as a civilian, if I approach the gate, this is basically what I'm confronted with. And it's this point in the talk where I'm going to hand over to a gentleman who is entitled to pass this sign and work within the set room.
Okay, thank you very much, George. We are very indebted to George for producing his book, Spies at Gilnahirk, which cover the operation of the station during the Second World War. And George, I hope you have a copy of that book at the end, which you can show people to see if we can boost the sales a little bit. But see, that has been a very valuable work. It's not often that we actually are able to speak to somebody who has actually worked in this station, and so we are delighted to speak to Brian today and to sort of ask him about what it was actually like to work inside the station. Before we move on to that, can I ask you, Brian, I know you worked in fact 2 postings over the years within Gilnahirk. Could you tell us actually when those postings were, and then maybe you would like to actually describe what it was like inside the building using the chart that in fact George has on the screen?
My first tour of duty at Gilnahirk was from August, September 1969, when I came back from Cyprus. I'd been working with the military out there. I was there from 69 until 72, when I went off to Hong Kong. I went to Ascension Island. I was at Ascension Island from 72 to 75. Then back to Gilnahirk from 75 until 78. And I went to Hong Kong then, which I should have went to originally, because when I joined the outfit, I went to Bletchley Park as an Air Ministry Intelligence Officer trainee. But after about 4 months there, we were all shunted into military intelligence, and I ended up in Cyprus. So here I was back at Gilnahirk again on my second tour of duty. Now, taking it, the diagram that George has on the screen, We come in the front door. You turn right, and red square is the supervisor's desk. On that desk, in addition to the supervisor, you had the scramble phone. Now, I can't remember whether it was the old inverted, they split the wavelength in two and inverted half of it, scramble it, or whether it was the more advanced predecessor of Pickwick, which I used when I was at Cheltenham. That was a very secure phone. What it does, it splits the voice spectrum up, and I think it's about five kcs or maybe less units, scrambles them together, shoots them down the line as a digital signal, and it's reintegrated at the other end. So in addition to the scrambled telephone, there was one-time pad. That's a book about the size of the old telephone directories, and it was used to convey information. When I was down the other end of the set room, I picked up a Russian printer, unknown printer. I would have to come down to the supervisor's desk, use the one-time pad and the telephone to contact the appropriate department at headquarters and relay the information. Just on that note, Charlie McCarthy, the supervisor during one of my tours of duty, Charlie was really unique, using the one-time pad. He would say a porthole, that was an O. Walking stick, that was a 7. An upright, that was a figure 1. 2 fat wafts, that was it. And they had various other sayings for these. The people at the other end had obviously got used to them, so they accepted it, no problem. Even the supervisor's desk, we then go up the set room a bit, and there's a door into the techs area. That was where the technicians fixed the equipment that us operators broke. And I think I was only ever in it the once, and that was just poking my head around the door to shout for the duty technician because something had gone wrong somewhere. Next to it was the facsimile position. This was a curse. We hated the damn thing. The reason why it was there was many years before, the Russians had brought out a new scramble system. They do that every 10 years. They bring out a new scramble system. Well, they brought out this super duper new twin channel, all singing, all dancing machine. And they sent it off all over the Soviet Union to various signal stations. And lo and behold, somebody out at Khabarovsk or Vladivostok, somewhere out that neck of the woods, he broke his, and they sent the technician out to fix it. And the technician had forgot to take a blueprint, the wiring diagram. So to avoid getting shot, he sent a signal back saying, somebody sent me the wiring diagram by radio facsimile. So by this time, of course, every station in the organization was on that frequency with that machine waiting for it to go. So right from the very word go, we had the latest super duper Russian scramble machine, the wiring diagram. He then had to fill the shift register, but as they very obligingly would send letters to start the shift register, the new supercomputers coming into being, they were able to get that, tamp it all down. But I'll deal with this under the last item on the board. Right, so we move from the one last thing about the facsimile machine. It was left the loudspeaker on. It was permanently tuned to this frequency in the hope that we get more wiring diagrams. But the other thing was, the frequency had a loud piercing whistle on it. And this used to echo around the set room. If you were struggling with a weak signal, it was a curse. The only redeeming feature of the whole setup was the thermographic paper used on the facsimile machine. It was great for cleaning your glasses. I used to wear glasses in those days. Right, we move on up set room. This looks more spaced out on the diagram than it actually was because they were very close together. And we come to the MSD, more search and development, or as I always knew it, general search. What this is positions which are dedicated to searching the band, depending on what band has been allocated to stations. Basically, you had 500 kilohertz, and you searched up and down that morning, noon, and night. When you relieved the guy who took over at the spot he left off, each position consisted of 2 Rakel receivers, a desk. There were 2 drawers, and they held nothing more than magazines and papers and whatnot. And the top one was always some of the main Russian call sign code books. Above the receivers, there was a couple of small boxes built in a wooden rack, and you put your material, your logs, and your traffic in them. It was on each position would be what was called a bank book. This told you about groups whose call signs had a habit of changing daily, and you never knew what they were. So at least to be latched onto that frequency, and you heard people working on it, and no call signs or strange call signs, you had a fair idea what they were. They're very helpful, the band book. From the MSD, go on up the set room. George has it at the top of the set room here. This was a non-Morse search and development. This was quite a skilled job. You had a rack with 2 Rakel receivers in it, a TFS3 bridge, an FS10 bridge, and a couple of other bits of gear. Beside the position, you had an undulator UG. Have I got it? Yeah, you had the undulator UG80 Marconi undulator. That gave you a proper trace of a signal that you were interested in. If it was DFS or FSK, you tuned it in by means of the DFS3 bridge, and you could then feed the result output as a DC pulse onto your undulator recording. It'd give you a paper trace about the width of the finger, the width of the average finger. Now you had 2 traces on it. The top trace with the signal, and the one below, you could set either 1 per second or multiples of that. I think 100 per second is the fastest it would go. It was very handy for signal analysis, because if you, again, you were allocated a band that was from Cheltenham, and you just searched up and down that band. But given that everybody and his brother by this time had a teleprinter or some non-Morse machine, very rarely, in fact, I can't remember ever doing it, searching the entire band in one go. So you had to sort of take over from the guy you were relieving at the point in the band that he was at, and then you worked on from there. He intercepted every signal, took it to pieces, seen what it was, and it headed to Kinder, which I'll deal with now. Kinder, just trying to see George's diagram here. The Kinder was a form of early computer. If I remember rightly, it took about 8 different transmissions. And what you did was when you latched onto one of these, you had to identify it and take a bit of traffic off it to support your identification. And this was clipped to your log. Your log, you would put the usual gubbins, station designator, etc., the frequency, time, and you would use a bit of complicated alphanumeric designator to indicate what type of transmission it was. Now, at headquarters, the so-called analysts, they didn't know how to use this system. So they referred to all the transmissions a code word. Each transmission had a code word. I mean, the original Soviet scrambled transmission, which was just a hack off of the German Enigma, was called Marula, M-A-R-U-L-A. All of these transmissions were named after birds or, various things. Marula in one of them. I can't go into the designation system, A, because it's very complex, and B, it's probably still quite secret. So looking at it, if you look at this in a book, say like we had printouts giving frequencies used by various organizations, the Russians especially, decided part of the sort of layout of this thing would be this alphanumeric designation, and that told you exactly, what you were up against. If you picked up a Russian scrambled printer and it wasn't listed on one of the frequency books, noted it down, made a note in your log, then you trailed all the way down the watch room or the set room to the supervisor's position, and using the one-time pad and the scramble phone, you rang that through to Cheltenham, and you noted that in your log that passed it to Cheltenham at such and such a time. Going back to the NMSD position, you had the two sets and all the ancillary gear above it. Then you had the Kinder, as I say, it was the basic sort of computer, did about 8 programs. What you did when you latched onto a signal, you fed it through, you had a plug board above your position, you could plug it through to the Kinder. You then went over to the Kinder and had, just trying to remember now, it was something like 92 lights, some of the very long transmissions. You had to tune it in, so you got these lights were flickering. Some of the transmissions, 4th channel, I'll have to give the name of the thing, 4-dog, we called it 4-dog. We tune your 4-dog in, and 4th channel was inverted. So you had to make sure that you threw the switches in the correct order, otherwise you get garbage out. The 4-dog transmission, you had to take a sample of the traffic off it, of at least one part. As I say, there were 4 channels in it. Each channel was capable of 4 subdivisions. So you had a 4x4, you could have 16 channels on the one transmission. So you tune your Kinder into that transmission and feed the output out onto 2 American printers. These were very, very good printers. They could adjust the speed from, I think it was 35 bodes up to 75. The 75 bodes allowed you to take transmissions, international teleprinter transmissions running at that speed, or scramble 75 bode transmissions. Again, you would look at that on your undulator. You would maybe print out a page of it on your printer just to check that you had made the right diagnosis. But they were lovely printers, very smooth, never any problems. They fed 4-fold fan-fold paper in them. I'd give you 4 copies in different colours. Next, the position, this was on the other side of the position, was voice analyzer. This was used for, you could analyse voice transmissions on it. At large, it was used for signal analysis. If you came across a multi-channel, a lot of international multi-channel things, you could have 16 or 32 or 40 or whatever
number of transmissions, or channels, sorry, in the one transmission. And bandwidth of these was about 85, the international ones. Soviets had their own bandwidths on channels. When you were on taking Soviet printer, they were always 500, 750, 1500 cycle widths. That was always a good indication, even if it was a new transmission, that you had a Soviet transmission. So you had that voice analyzer, and I hated using it because it was about the size of a small cabinet, and on top of it you had this column, 8 inches tall, 6 inches across, and it had two wire springs on it, and you put a piece of paper, special paper, about a foot long, you thread it underneath these rings, and you had to make sure you got it the right way overlapping, because as this thing spun, it put the signal onto the paper, and if you hadn't got it overlapped the right way, it would mark the drum and you'd be in trouble. The other thing was, it gave off this thick black smoke, and given that you had the kinder on one side of you, and it was quite tall, it was the size of a wardrobe, and your rack, which was again the size of a wardrobe, then other ancillary equipment around you, it meant that the smoke hung about, and it used to choke me, the smell of it. In fact, I said in the end, look, unless you get a fan in here, I'm not going to use this bloody thing because it's filling my lungs. I didn't realise at that time that I had a lung problem. Next to the voice analyzer, I had another printer, if I remember rightly. That was just your bog standard 50 baud printer. It had a box full of filters you could put in to various other equipment. So that's the kinder printers, and just trying to make sure I haven't standing out. Now, going over to the other side of the room, there was East German state security position. This was for the Stasi. And that was a bit of a curse because you only ran it in the early morning, first thing in the morning shift. It was very low frequency. It was about 1800 kcs or kilohertz. And it was keeping track of Herr Wolf, who was the Stasi chief, because he was given to flying about in his aeroplane. And you were able to keep track of him moving about. Plus, I suppose he must have broke the code because he wouldn't have used so much effort. I mean, I assume that Gilnahirk, by virtue of the fact that they were putting in such poor results, I mean, the printer would drop out quite regularly because that time of the morning, very weak signal, very low frequency, it would drop out and they must have been taking it elsewhere. So what we were feeding in was just backup. So even the Stasi put out via a page print, via tape print. So when you finish the SCAD, you rolled your tape up, fasten it down with a elastic band, and the log went into the traffic handlers. Moving on down the set room, on the left-hand side of the set room, you had the duty officer's cabin. This was the stupid thing about the composite signals organisation, because you had supervisors who were in the set room. You had a duty officer who was in the set room doing virtually what the supervisor did. Then you had SSRO, senior station radio operator, then principal station radio operator. And all that did was, to get promoted, you had to be good, or you had to know somebody, were in the right handshake. It meant that good operators are being trained away into admin positions, instead of just having an admin guy in right at the word go. But there you are, that's the way these organizations are run. Duty officer's cabin, I don't think he had a scramble phone. one of his duties was every night, I think it was, he would set up the scrambled printer, put in the codes for it, and on the phone. That makes me think that the phone was the early version of Pickwick, which breaks the voice down into discrete channels. Because the old phone that you see on the movies and that, the black phone with a green handset with 3 buttons, that was the old wartime half-wave inversion thing. It wasn't, very terribly secure. Whereas the other one was digital. You could pick up the phone and you'd hear an initial energizing click, and that would it. You wouldn't hear anymore. It was just digital. So coming down from the DO's cabin, you had the Demos area. Now, this was in the form of a sort of like a wee square of its own. And in the middle of the square, you had the 2 desks. The desks had no radio equipment. They were just for writing on. And you kept your log on them. The Demos equipment, you took 2 linked ends. That meant 2 separate operators, and there were 4 scrambled transmissions. You took the signal on a Rakel receiver, fed it through a bridge, the TFS3 or the FS10. I think they were all TFS3 bridges in my day. And that gave you a digital output, sorry, a DC output. This was then fed via some circuitry to 15-inch Ampex reels. These ran at very slow speed, and each reel lasted for 12 hours. So at midday and midnight, you put a fresh reel on. The recorders, the way they worked was when you switched them off, you put your new reel on, threaded it through. First of all, you had a special liquid, some sort of alcohol-based liquid with earbuds, and you cleaned the heads and blew out any old dust, from the magnetic tape. You did that, threaded your tape through, engaged it on the empty spool, spooled it on for about 2 or 3 seconds, so as it was well held on the empty reel. Then you switched off, and you pressed another button, and you moved the recording head to the on position. You had to run that for 30 seconds, and you switched another position, and that then started burning the information onto the tape. Tapes were run through the computer at Cheltenham at something like 50 times line speed, very, very fast. The whole tape, 12-hour tape would run through in a couple of minutes. And this is why you had to ensure that the start of the recording and the end of the recording had this 30 seconds of blank tape, because the Demos machine would put signals on there to tell the computer, hang on, the end of the reel is coming up, or hang on guys, it's the start of a reel. Failure to do that meant the reel was useless, the information was lost. So you had 2 of those. Each was under the control of an operator. And in the early morning hour time, or breakfast time Russia, they would change frequency. They'd go to their day frequencies. And you had to be quite nippy, because they would just sign off, and you had to nip them onto the day frequency, find out if they were on that frequency or one of the ancillary frequencies, and you were listening to the other end then in your headphones. And once you'd got one end up, you knew which frequency to put the other end on, and you tuned it all in again, started your recording. Well, sorry, the recording would still be going on, but you would have switched it into the standby position to tell the computer, look, this here's just rubbish, ignore this. Then you'd start your recording. Again, you had to give it 30 seconds. In the old days when I started doing the Demos, this was just not long after I come back from Cyprus. took the log in the conventional way. In other words, you put your admin details down and you started your recording. And you did all the remarks in free flow. In other words, the way you would put them into your log, like interference and all of this, signal strength and all this. The Americans brought in this new system, which was an absolute bloody nightmare. It was a 4-element system, figures and letters. And before, when the Russians changed from, say, night frequency to day frequency, all you did, you just put a line in your log on the day frequency of 15574 kilohertz. Put that frequency in the frequency column in your log with a time, and that was you. But no, using this new American system, you had at least 10 entries, and you were expected to do this in real time while still tuning it in. Utter madness. Coming back up the middle of the set room, coming again from the door this time, you come to the discriminator position, the MSD, more search and development discriminator position. This would have been about 12 or 13 foot long. There was a couple of ordinary tables, and bolted to the top of them were these wooden boxes with slots in them, slots of various widths. That held all the different books that you needed, call sign books, RU&E, Russian call sign books, the Type A, Type B call sign books, your Gilnahirk stick, that was for breaking out the Type B call signs. The Type B and Type A call signs, the Russians had pinched from the Germans. It was the German army call sign. As a result, having had access to the German army code books ourselves, somebody at Cheltenham worked out a very cunning way of telling which call signs were with which group. All they needed really was one guy in the morning to pick up a group, and that was it. You had the rest of them more or less pinned for the day. The MSD table, as I say, there's a table man on, and if one of the MSD operators got an item that he didn't know, wasn't in the limited books that he had at his disposal, he would just shout for the table man. He would come over, look over his shoulder, and have a go at identifying it. Again, as an operator, get preconceived ideas. If you're listening to a signal and you think, oh, that reminds me, that sounds like, Hong Kong sub-aqua or something. You're thinking along those lines instead of looking at the information that's on the log. I mean, even such small things as, even today, if I saw the letters FE and then a figure or two figures, say like FE4 on the log, I would instantly know that's North Korean Diplo. He wants him to move 4 kcs, move up 4 kcs. Same way, FAO, 2 figures or 1 figure, North Korean Diplo, move down. Various other outfits had similar sort of thing. So the table man had about, if I remember rightly, about 20 books, maybe 25. And one of your jobs was, if you were table man, you had to take a book at random once a shift, open it and count the number of pages to make sure that none of the pages were missing. Sort of security device. So the table man controlled the 4 MSD sets. Further down the room, you had the MSD table man position. Again, I actually set that up, Gilly, and I think in the other stations copied it. Because I had intercepted this item one night it was, the middle of the night, and I worked on it for an hour before I was able to tie it down. It was Peruvian Air Force. What had transpired was we'd had a big storm at Gilnahirk, and one of the club and folded terminated dipoles had fallen down across the fence. And we were getting South American stuff romping in like nobody's prison, stuff nobody had ever heard of before. So it took me an hour to find out that this was Peruvian Air Force. And I submitted a wee note saying that in view of the amount of time I analysed it out, the amount of time I had spent off the set trying to identify something was that very little set time was being devoted to search. So I suggested that if we had a table man. So after a while, the powers that be adopted this, and they sent me in a guy called Derek Black over to Cheltenham, and I'll tell you that on another time, but we set up a table man position. Again, you had about 20 books, only these were all for non-Morse search and development. The MSD man had a diary, and the NMSD man had a diary, and they left notes of anything untoward that you'd come across. I was on NMSD one day, and we were tasked with Indonesian Diplo, and they had a habit of sending out frequency changes, QSY Lima, QSY Ampat. Well, I remembered Milan from when I was a boy out there, so I knew that was frequency 5, frequency 4. Sometimes they'd send the frequency, very obligingly send it in, Malay figures, which is very handy. So coming back and past the DO's cabin, you had a door into the PA. I never went through it. Women were in there. The strong room was in there. The scrambled printer controls were in there. The cipher machine and the voice cipher machine. So basically that was Gilly. Can you see anything on the diagram I've left out, George?
Direction finding.
The direction finding, that was usually part of the table man's job as well. People would want DF on something. So you had this separate console beside the table man's position. You would dial the setup, or dial the signal up. It allowed you to plug into the guy's signal. You could match up that you were reading the right signal, and you then steered. You were called Cheltenham on voice, and you steered them onto the signal, and they handled it from there. I'm nearly sure I've forgotten something else, George. The maintenance panel. This was the aerial comparator board that allowed the technicians to check, the aerials were working right. It also come under the control of the NMSD position, because if I was looking at a multi-channel system, say like DFS, double frequency shift key, I could plug one end up on the aerial discriminator panel, the text panel, and feed it through to my position. So it saved me having to retune if one arm went quiet and the other came up. I think that's about all, George.
That's very good, Brian. Now I'm just going to finish off the PowerPoint, if Roger's happy with that.
Sure.
Well, just before you do, George, the end of the war, the period George is talking about, there was 30,000 intercept operators. After the war, when Britain was bankrupt, this was run down to 1,800. So there were only ever 1,800 of us. And in view of what we did, I think the government, the nation, got pretty good value for their money.
Before George actually takes it onto the slideshow, could I ask you, what would you describe as the main remit, in fact, which Gilly had? I know it was controlled by GCHQ, but what was its actual remit?
Before I went there, during the years, my father there, that was from, as George pointed out, when the new brick station was built, from about 1947 up until I went there in 69. I think about the mid-60s, early 60s, Gilly had mainly been a DCHQ station, in as much that it dealt with Diplo and state security transmissions. Was some search, but not much. Occasionally, if you run search and they declared an Attica Blue, that was Russian long-range nuclear bombers. Everything was dropped, and everybody ignored everything on the plan. You were usually given a card with another frequency range on, and you searched that frequency range for these Soviet long-range bombers. And if you got them, that was a high priority item, and it was DF'd and treated, like holy writ. Also on the MSD position, you had what you call your hot list. These were little cards with transmissions of the utmost interest to the department. And these ranged from sort of like state security, spy transmissions. I even remember there was one, an Australian ham, whatever he'd been doing, but he'd earned himself a position on the hot list. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Brian, you were wanting to take it forward, George?
Yes, just to finish off now, to bring the story to a conclusion. Shortly after I began my research, more and more of what went on during the Second World War regarding Bletchley Park came into the public notice. Unfortunately, there was little or no mention of the support that Bletchley received. So in 2011, Her Majesty the Queen unveiled this memorial to the outstations that supplied Bletchley Park with raw signals intelligence and other vital services. The memorial, as it says, we also served. And on the end of this memorial is engraved the names of all those outstations. And among the stations is, of course, the name of Gilnahirk. Now, bringing the story bang up to date, nothing of the wartime or the post-war stations remain to this very day. And when the post-war Cold War station was demolished, the powers that be said to the developer who was hoping to build luxury houses, no, you can't do that. You must put the building back in a similar format. And he created 14 luxury apartments, and they sit within their own grounds. And if we look at the former Cold War station, we can see the resemblance. Now, the other big bonus, as far as I was concerned, during the war and also after the war, the station acquired a nickname, and that was Gilly, which in fact was the teleprinter address for Gilnahirk during the Second World War. And when we approached the local council with a view to renaming the site, I was delighted to see that they had agreed on the name Gilly Court Manor, so that there is the association between what went on and the current day. And finally, as Roger said, if anybody would like a copy of the book which I have written, which covers not only the station, but also the voluntary interceptors who worked in Northern Ireland, please note the address, www.cottagepublications.com. Don't go through Amazon, go through this website. And with that said, I will now unshare my screen, Roger.
Well, that's a point when we leave George, who was telling a lot of the story there, and we're going to go now back live to Northern Ireland with Roger. Roger, a fascinating story.
Yes. Yes, David. I was lucky enough to know Brian. Brian is still alive, incidentally, though he's not in the best of health. But an amusing story about Brian. About 3 years ago, I was doing a field day on the site, well, at Gilly, operating Morse code and taking signals coming in. And Brian came up to see me, and he sat down beside me. Now, bear in mind, he trained in Morse code in Bletchley in 1960. That's when he learned Morse code. He hadn't decoded or heard Morse code for about 50 years, and he was sitting beside me on the field day as signals were coming in, and he was decoding them better than I could. And I remarked on this, and he later contacted me and he said, "I would like you to test my CW copy over Zoom. Can we have a session?" And I said, okay. I arranged a Zoom session with him, and I met him on Zoom, and I said, right, I'm going to send you a rubber stamp QSO. And he says, no, don't. He said, get a book, any book, and pick a paragraph and send a paragraph. So I sent a paragraph at 20 words per minute, and he copied it perfectly. He then said, right, go to 25. Pick another paragraph. It did it again. He copied it. He said, right, try 30. I got another paragraph, sent code at 30 words per minute. He copied it. He said, right, try 35. So I got another paragraph, sent it at 35 words per minute. Not only did he copy it, but he copied my mistakes, because 35 is a bit fast for me. And then he says, right, try 40. Well, I couldn't send it 40, it just fell apart. So, here's a man who learnt through the forces or the security services to learn Morse. He hadn't copied it for 50 years. And lo and behold, he's practically word perfect. So I was really very, very impressed. I grew up beside Gilly. My own memory of Gilnahirk listening station was as a young boy when I was walking a dog past the station. It was still in operation. Would have been the late 60s, maybe into early 1970s. I was walking a dog, and everybody in the area was aware that it was a hush-hush station and you didn't talk about it. And I was a bit, I suppose, mischievous, and I went up to the security guard at the gate and I said, what do you do in here? And he said, oh, we make carpets. And I said, do you weave them on the aerials that are in the fields around here? Is that where you weave them? And at that point he chased me. So it was the means of getting me into amateur radio. So that's my recollections of the station when it was in operation. As George says, it's now luxury apartments. It's a gated area. And they've done a very good job in building a new building that looks pretty much like the old building. And I was through the old building when it was derelict. So I don't know if there's any questions, David, but I'm certainly, if I can answer any questions, I will.
Thank you, Roger. Yeah, and then we have got a couple of questions already, but if you haven't already done that, please, you can on Facebook or on BATC, you can put your question or your comments about this, and I'll relay them to Roger as well. I know that Roger and George are friends as well, so I'm sure any feedback that you want to send to George, who wrote that book as well, that will go back to Roger. Actually, I'm just going to show you that book again. I know that was covered at the end. We've made a slide up here, Roger. So there we are. That is the address at the bottom. I mean, you can find the book just by going to cottagepublications.com. So you don't need to remember the whole of that link. But for people who are watching this and have recorded it or whatever, you can watch it back. It's a really good book. Excuse me. And I believe, Roger, from our discussion the other day at the rehearsal, I think you said that this was in its 4:3 print. Was that right?
That's right. It's just about to go to print for the fourth time. So it probably will be available through, I would imagine, the RSGB as well. But it's amazing how the interest in this just does not go away. It's phenomenal, the interest in this area. And one of the key things in that book are little mini bios of VIs, voluntary interceptors, who served in Northern Ireland. And I imagine now there are no VIs left that are alive. They've all passed on. But it's amazing how they held the secrecy of what they did, even from their families. Like, I remember hearing a story of a VI who was going on holiday to North Coast to the seaside town of Portrush. The first thing he packed in his car was his radio. And when he arrived at the guest house he was staying in, the first thing he actually took out was his radio. And his wife said, "Do you not think you're taking this hobby a bit over the top? You'd be a bit too seriously." His wife didn't even know that he was a VI. So, Spies at Gilnahirk, it was the best kept secret in Northern Ireland. Sorry, David,
No, it's excellent. No, and I don't know if you heard me mention it. I don't know whether your Radcom has landed on your doorstep today. Has it yet?
No, not yet.
When it does, there's a very relevant story to this just by coincidence. In fact, it has a little link to Norfolk. I won't spoil it for those of you who are waiting for your Radcom, but I know some people have got it, and we've seen it today as well. And there's a really good 2-page story about voluntary interceptors being recognised at last, but I won't say, don't want to spoil anybody. There's a really good write-up in there, so this is a well-timed talk for us here. So I'm going to read the questions that we've got so far, but again, for those of you at home, if you haven't already done so, please put your questions and comments now and we'll read them to Roger. First up came from Paul, G4XBT. He says, firstly, what was the range of frequencies that you were monitoring at Gilnahirk?
I couldn't be precise, but it was certainly wider than the amateur bands. But they did go down. It was right across the whole, I think, HF range. And also, there would have been signals that would have been more easily heard at one time of the day than there would have been at the other. A bit like those maybe in years gone by, if you remember your Radio Luxembourg, that it was usually rubbish during the day, but it picked up at night. Well, the same sort of thing applied with other radio frequencies. There would be, in fact, specific times when they were strong, or particular times of the year when they would be strong, and not so strong at other times of the year. So I think it really spread through the full range of the HF range band. It does give you a lot of admiration for the work of VIs or people who worked in these stations, these Y stations, because they were listening to weak signals. They weren't interested in the strong commercial signals. It was the signals that was hiding behind stronger signals, and therefore you had to discern the signal that you were wanting to actually listen to behind a stronger signal. Anybody that is a Morse operator will know that we don't like weak signals, but by and large, weak signals were their stock and trade.
Of course, and I guess most of the amateur radios, like they are now, in those days, they also received over a much wider range, and that's what they were picking up. And I dare say as well, would it be right in thinking that some of the amateur radios, given the technology of the day, were more sensitive because they didn't, broadcast signals were by and large quite loud. So maybe amateur receivers were better equipped and better for receiving that than, say, the average shortwave domestic receiver.
I'm not so sure that was the case, especially for VIs who were really civilians and volunteered to do VI work. The old Eddystone radio, what was it, the 8W All World the all world radio was a 2-valve set, I think, and not very sophisticated. And it was only whenever the American radios came in, what was it, I've forgotten the initial of it off the top of my head, but when those radio sets came in, they were state of the art. It was an American radio, but an awful lot of VIs didn't have those. So they were using sometimes kits that they made up themselves.
Was it initials? Was it RCA by any chance?
No. Oh, I should know it.
That's okay. Well,
MRO.
oh wait, HRO maybe.
HRO, yes.
HRO. Yeah, I've heard of HRO. Yes. I was going to
Yes.
say if we don't get it, I'm sure somebody who's watching will. Thank you.
Well,
And
those were state of the art in their day.
yes,
HRO was a state of art radio. Yes.
still very highly regarded, of course, as well with many. A second part of Paul's question. Paul's G4 XBT actually now SQ1 NXQ, I believe, because he lives in Poland. He's one of our members. He also asked what antennas we used, long wires, loops, etc. Do you know?
Yes, from memory, when there were dipoles, which were strung between pylons, there was a whole array of dipoles in the fields. And there was also a circular array, antenna array. If you know with the donut building, in fact, Cheltenham, they have the same circular array around the dome. I just forget the name of it. But there was that type of array. But yes, they were wire. They were not verticals. They were wire. Back to you, David.
Right, thank you. Yeah. And another question now from Ray, G3XLG. How was the information sent to Bletchley Park or Cheltenham? Was it by telephone, teleprinter, or what, he says?
It was scrambled. I think Brian referred to that. There was a scrambled telephone, and they also used a one-time pad as well to encrypt it. So there would have been secure links between Gilly and Cheltenham.
So it was sent by voice, essentially, was it, rather than a data form or something like that?
Probably in the later days, yes. But in the early days, it might have been Morse. No, it wouldn't have been Morse because it's too open. It probably would have been voice, yes.
Okay. Well,
Not actually, to be honest.
Thank you. Yeah, a question just came in, and I was just going to close. Tony G0MQG says the old amateur receivers of World War II era that he's worked on had an RF stage in front of the mixer, whereas domestic receivers usually the RF stage was simply a tuned circuit. So maybe that would give you better selectivity, I think, wouldn't it? Probably.
Yes. Obviously, selectivity would be, of course, key. But I still come back to the point that many VIs did not have access to state-of-art kit. They were using what they had.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Well, it's been a fascinating story, Roger. Thank you very much for bringing this to us tonight. Would you pass on our regards as well to both George and Brian, who are clearly part of telling the story tonight?
Yes.
Again, we're going to just quickly put up that slide where people can buy the book, because I know it's going into its 4th reprint. I think if we can just do that, Tammy. Sorry, I put Tammy on the spot because we've got some techno jiggery to do here. But once again, Roger, thank you very much for joining us on tonight.
Okay.
Here's that slide again with the book. There we are. So again, it's cottage-publications.com, and you'll get the very latest version for 4th reprint of that.
It's been a pleasure to be with you tonight, David. George does send his regards. He did have another commitment tonight, which is why he couldn't be here. But I did discuss with him that we would be doing this. He was very happy that the in fact recording was being used. So again, thank you, and I will pass on your regards to Brian as well. As I said, Brian is still with us, but his health is not great. But it's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, many, many thanks. And I said to you and to everybody else who's an RSGB member, look out for that latest copy of Radcom. It's going to arrive any moment if you haven't already got it. And that's got some useful, very useful sort of follow-up on VIs and things like that. Thank you very much, Roger.
Okay, all the best. Bye, everybody.
Take care. There we are. That's very much our thanks to Roger, MI0WWB, and of course to George and Brian as well for telling that story. That's almost it for NARC Live tonight. Just to let you know what's coming on the week again for the club. On Saturday at 10 o'clock, we've got the Koblensked on 7.123 megs and a 145 250 VHF local call-in at 10 o'clock on Saturday. On Sunday at 7 o'clock, the GB2RS News on repeater GB3MB. Also on GB3MB on Monday night at 7:30, the Monday Night Net. And then the 80 metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz is at 8 o'clock on Monday. And then next Wednesday, that special evening with Rob Howard. Quite an extraordinary life, I think he's led so far. And he'll be sharing that all with us. I hope you'll make it to CNS. And please keep in touch with your stories and your pictures and any what on earth objects. We would love to see them. And also, of course, must mention this again, the Christmas card. We will be doing a new fresh Christmas card, but we need to know by, say, Tuesday at the very latest, if you would like us to send it to someone, send us the name and address. We'll print out the cards specially. We'll take them on Wednesday night, get them signed by as many members as we can on the night and send it. And it should really make somebody's Christmas, I hope. Thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, from Tammy M0TC.
Bye-bye.
And from me, David G7URP. Take care of yourself. Look after each other. Bye-bye.